He couldn't have been older than 4. Little sneakers, blue hoodie, one of those ridiculous toddler-sized sunglasses that make kids look like celebrities in hiding. He was holding a yellow plastic shovel and standing beside her. Taryn, digging into the wet sand like life was simple and fair. She looked happy, until she saw me. Her body stiffened. She dropped the kid's hand like it was on fire. For a second, I honestly thought she might scream. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just wide, panicked eyes and a tremble in her jaw like she'd seen someone crawl out of her nightmares. And maybe I had. Maybe I was the nightmare she'd buried and thought would never claw its way back. I didn't plan on being there. I hadn't been to that beach in years. Honestly, I forgot it even existed. But life has this sick sense of humor, the kind that drags you back to the exact place your ribs were broken, just to see if they'll snap again. I wasn't there to heal. I wasn't reclaiming my power. I was just looking for parking. Yeah, that's how this started. I took a wrong turn trying to avoid some construction, ended up at Fairview Beach, a place she once swore she hated because the bathrooms smelled like wet socks. The irony. The universe didn't need 3 years to build this moment. It needed one missed exit and a Sunday afternoon. When our eyes met, something ugly surfaced in her. Not guilt, not anger, fear. That's when I knew. He wasn't just any kid. He was our unfinished sentence. She looked away, quickly, like if she just turned fast enough, I might disappear, like I was some awkward ex from high school she'd bumped into at the grocery store. But we both knew better. I wasn't a ghost from her past. I was the man she left without a damn word. And now, 3 years later, she was pretending she couldn't remember the shape of the life she abandoned. I didn't walk over. Not right away. I stood there for a while, hands in my jacket pockets, watching her try to compose herself. She whispered something to the man next to her, the one with the perfect posture and that smug golden retriever energy. He turned to look at me too. Didn't recognize me, of course. Why would he? I was just the broken ex-husband. A name she probably scratched out of her story. The kid was distracted, shoveling sand into a plastic bucket, humming some tune kids only know from cartoons. But I couldn't stop looking at his face. Something about it made my stomach twist. Not in a sweet way. Not in a wow, kids are beautiful kind of way. No, it was something else. Something deeply familiar and unsettling. Taryn bent down and said something to him. Probably an excuse. Maybe she said she saw a jellyfish. Maybe she said it was just some weird man from the beach. Maybe she said nothing at all. But they were gone in under a minute, marching toward the parking lot like someone had just lit the sand on fire. I didn't follow. Not yet. I just stood there like the pathetic, gutless loser I'd become. I had dreamt of this moment for years. The confrontation, the apology, the explanation. But instead I stood there, stunned, watching the only woman I ever loved disappear again. This time with a child in tow and fear in her eyes. But this time, I wasn't going to let her vanish into thin air. I waited until I saw her car pull out. A silver Volvo. Still had that stupid Namaste sticker on the bumper. I followed, not close enough to alarm her, but close enough to know where she was headed. Some people might say that's obsessive. Call it what you want. I called it closure. She pulled into a duplex in a quiet neighborhood about 15 minutes inland. Nice place. 2-story. Pale blue siding. A swing set in the yard. The kind of place you build a life in. So she had built one. She was living like none of it happened. Like she hadn't destroyed me and moved on. Like I didn't matter. And the part that really boiled my blood, maybe I didn't. I parked 2 streets over, walked the rest of the way. I didn't knock. I didn't approach. I just stood behind a hedge across the street, watching her unload beach bags and the little boy. The man opened the front door. He kissed her forehead. She laughed. She laughed. And just as they stepped inside, the boy turned back toward the street. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. He squinted, tilted his head. I froze. Because I swear to God, that kid had my mother's eyes. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my mind like it was some kind of cursed home movie. Her face when she saw me. The way her body flinched. The way she gripped the kid's shoulder like she needed something to ground her. That wasn't the face of a woman caught off guard. It was the face of someone who had spent years praying that exact moment would never come. I started pacing around midnight. I don't even know why. I don't live in some sleek apartment anymore. I rent a depressing 1-bedroom above a dry cleaner, where the hallway always smells like steamed polyester. But pacing helped. It made me feel like I was doing something. By 2:17 a.m., I was sitting on the floor, staring at an old photo of us I still kept in a drawer, even though I've told everyone I threw all that stuff out. It was from one of our last real vacations, Palm Springs. She was wearing that wide-brimmed hat I always made fun of, and she was holding a piña colada with a pineapple wedge bigger than her head. We looked happy, and I was dumb enough to believe we actually were. But now I had questions. Real questions. That kid wasn't just some random child she picked up along the way. He had my eyes. I know how that sounds. I know how delusional it makes me look. But I'm telling you, I stared at my own face in the mirror during breakdown after breakdown for 2 straight years. I know that face. I know that bone structure. I know that brow. It was like seeing my childhood in miniature, running around with a shovel and a bucket like the last 3 years never even happened. So the next morning, I called in sick. Not that my boss at the shipping warehouse would care. I'm a glorified forklift operator with a caffeine addiction and a used-to-be-married aura that makes new hires avoid lunch breaks with me. But I needed the day. I needed to see her again. I drove past her duplex at 9:43 a.m. I'd memorized the number on the curb. There was no car in the driveway. The golden retriever husband must have gone to work already. I parked 2 houses down, in front of some old lady's hydrangeas, and waited. At 10:06, she came out the door with the boy. He was wearing a dinosaur backpack. I watched her buckle him into a booster seat in the back of her car. She looked over her shoulder twice. Not like she was being cautious, more like she was being hunted. That's when it hit me. She thought I was going to show up. She was waiting for it. I followed her to a preschool tucked behind a coffee shop. As she walked him in, he tripped slightly on the step. She bent down to comfort him. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could see the way her hand brushed the back of his hair. Fast, nervous, like she wasn't used to it. Or like she was trying too hard to be gentle. And then I realized something even more disturbing. She wasn't acting like his mother. She was acting like someone who wasn't supposed to be his mother. I stayed parked outside the preschool for a while, just watching other parents come and go, trying to act like I wasn't spiraling out in the front seat of a dented Nissan with duct tape on the side mirror. It was surreal. I felt like I was trespassing in someone else's story, a stranger watching a life that should have been mine. There was this nauseating rhythm to it all. The hugs at drop-off, the backpacks, the tired smiles. But the way Taryn moved, it didn't fit. She kept looking over her shoulder like someone might snatch the boy away. I noticed it again when she picked him up later that afternoon. She parked in a different spot. She didn't make small talk with the other moms. She didn't check her phone. Her hand never left the strap of his backpack. And when he climbed into the car, she reached back and touched his head like she had to make sure he was still real. And that's when something flipped in me. She wasn't being protective, she was being paranoid. And that changes everything. Because Taryn was never the paranoid one. I was. She used to laugh at how I double-checked the locks. How I kept emergency cash under the sink. How I never trusted valet parking because they might clone the key fob. And now here she was, doing laps in a Volvo like someone might be tailing her. And someone was. Me. That night, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I messaged Lisa, Taryn's best friend. Maid of honor at our wedding. Keeper of secrets and giver of passive-aggressive compliments about my wardrobe. We hadn't spoken since Taryn left. She'd gone radio silent the second the marriage imploded, just like everyone else in Taryn's circle. But I knew Lisa was the weak link. She'd always been too fond of wine and too careless with her words when emotional. So I kept it simple. Saw her today. She has a kid. Anything you want to tell me? 3 hours later, I got a reply. No greeting. No apology. Just 2 words. You should drop it. My heart started pounding. I stared at the screen like it might spit out the truth if I looked hard enough. I typed back. Is he mine? She left me on read. The next day, I parked on a hill above their neighborhood, coffee in hand, binoculars I hadn't used since college in my glove compartment. I watched that blue house from a distance while pretending to care about a podcast I wasn't listening to. At 5:12 p.m., something finally happened. The man, her new partner, I guess, came home. But he didn't come inside alone. He was holding a manila envelope. Taryn met him at the door, and he looked pissed. His hands were moving fast, like he was explaining something urgent. She froze in the doorway, blocking him from coming in further. He pushed past her anyway. They didn't close the door. I couldn't hear the argument, but I could see it. His arms flying. Her hands on her hips. the envelope hitting the ground. She grabbed it quickly, tucked it into the drawer by the entryway like it might explode if it stayed out too long. And when he stormed out 15 minutes later, slamming the car door hard enough to rattle the street, she just stood there, staring at the floor. Motionless. Alone. I took a photo of the license plate. I was going to find out who he was. Not out of jealousy. Not even anger. I just needed a timeline. A sequence. A truth. I needed to know when he entered the picture, and why she looked like a woman hiding from herself every time she stepped outside. And the truth is, I wasn't watching her out of love anymore. I was watching her because something was very, very wrong. I spent the next morning obsessively trying to identify the man from the night before. The one who'd stormed out with the rage of someone who'd been lied to, manipulated, or maybe worse. The car was a 2020 black Lexus RX with an expired parking pass on the rearview mirror. I zoomed in on the photo of the license plate and ran it through an online lookup site. It gave me a name, Griffin M. Leary. No address, just a city match, Lake Pine, 20 minutes away. I dug deeper. LinkedIn. Found him. VP of product at some B2B software company with a smug smile in his profile photo. Married once, divorced in 2019. No kids listed. But there was something in his face that gave me pause. A kind of false confidence. A salesman's mask. The type of guy who could cheat on someone and convince himself it was her fault. I stared at his photo for a long time, wondering, is this who she left me for? But no, it didn't add up. If she left me for him, why the secrecy? Why the paranoia? Why pretend the kid was hers and hers alone? Something else was going on. Later that afternoon, I did something reckless. I walked the neighborhood. Nothing too obvious. I was just jogging past her house. Hoodie up, sunglasses on. I paused near the corner where the garbage bins were lined up for Thursday pickup. I never expected to see anything useful, but luck, or fate, finally handed me something. There, sticking halfway out of the black trash can, was a torn piece of the manila envelope. I swear my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I looked around. No cars. No people. I reached in and pulled out what looked like the corner of a legal document, half soaked in old coffee grounds and stuck to a used napkin. I peeled it apart and read the top line. Most of it was shredded, but the header was clear. Notice of petition to establish parental relationship. I didn't breathe for 10 seconds. I read the words again. And again. It wasn't a birth certificate. It wasn't an adoption form. It was a paternity petition, filed with the county court. Filed recently. And below the fold, just visible before the tear cut through it, were two partial names. Respondent, Taryn L. Petitioner, Griffin M. L.E. I nearly dropped it right there. This wasn't just drama. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a legal war over a child. A child who might not even belong to the man who thought he was the father. A child who might not even belong to either of them. And yet the one person who hadn't appeared in any of this was me, which raised a terrifying possibility. Had they both known the truth from the beginning and erased me? The rest of the document was shredded, unreadable, soaked in garbage juice. But I kept the piece. I folded it carefully, tucked it inside a paperback I kept in the car, and drove home with shaking hands. That night, I didn't sleep again. Instead, I sat by the window, thinking about that little boy, his face, his eyes, my eyes, wondering what he knew, wondering if he asked questions about where he came from, if he noticed the tension between the adults, if he wondered why his mother looked afraid when a strange man watched her from across a parking lot. And then it hit me. What if he didn't know I existed because they planned it that way? What if the woman I once promised forever to had stolen a piece of me and built a lie around it? I didn't go to work the next morning. I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I sat on the edge of my mattress with that torn piece of the court document resting on my knee, staring at it like it might sprout answers if I blinked hard enough. I couldn't stop shaking. It was like every nerve in my body had finally woken up after 3 years of emotional hibernation. I'd lived so long in the fog of why did she leave me that I'd never stopped to ask the bigger, darker question, what was she hiding when she did? By noon, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to get anything more out of Taryn. Not yet. She was too on guard, too slippery, too protected. But there was someone else. Someone who might be easier to crack. Someone who already responded to my text with just enough fear to tell me she knew more than she wanted to. Lisa. I hadn't seen her since the week after the divorce paperwork showed up in my mailbox. She didn't return calls. She changed her number. She unfollowed me on everything. But I remembered where she worked, a boutique floral shop on York Street. The kind of place that sold overpriced orchids to women who thought crystals could fix trauma. I waited until just after 3, when I knew the shop would be winding down for the day, and I walked in without a plan. No threats. No yelling. I wasn't here to play the angry ex. I was here because I needed the truth, and I had a feeling Lisa's guilt was finally heavy enough to drag it out of her. The bell above the door jingled when I stepped inside. It smelled like roses and citrus, and for a second, I hated how beautiful it was. How peaceful. Like she lived in a world untouched by the fallout of what Taryn had done. She turned from behind the counter and froze. She didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't even pretend not to know me. She just stared, and then I saw it. Her eyes were already glassy. She was crying before I said a single word. "Hey, Lisa," I said quietly. She didn't move. Her hands were locked together in front of her, like she was afraid they'd betray her if she let them go. "I need to ask you something," I continued. "And I need you to be honest with me, even if it's ugly. Especially if it's ugly." Her bottom lip trembled. I pulled the crumpled court document from my coat pocket and placed it gently on the counter between us. She didn't touch it, but her eyes darted to the header, and I saw the way her shoulders dropped. Like the secret she was carrying had just punched her in the ribs. "I saw them," I said. "Taryn, the boy, the man. I saw all of them. And I saw her face when she saw me. She looked like a woman on the verge of collapse." Lisa's throat bobbed. She tried to speak, then stopped. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," I said, though even I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. "But I need to know the truth. I need to know if that kid, if he's mine." That's when Lisa finally cracked. She wiped her face, took a shaky breath, and said, "You were never supposed to see him." The sentence knocked the wind out of me. "What does that mean?" I asked. She looked down, like she couldn't bear to see my reaction to what she was about to say. "I told her not to do it," she whispered. "I begged her to tell you. To tell someone. But she was scared. She said it would ruin everything." "Ruin what?" I snapped. "A lie? A fantasy she built with another man?" Lisa looked up sharply. "You don't understand. It wasn't like that. At first, she thought she could raise him on her own. She didn't want child support. She didn't want a messy custody battle. She didn't even want you to know because she didn't trust how you'd react." "I never laid a hand on her," I said through gritted teeth. "Not once. Not even when she left. I begged her to come back. And she knew I would have. I would have done anything for that kid." "I know," Lisa whispered, and finally the tears started falling for real. That's the part that killed me. I leaned against the counter like my legs had gone soft. My mouth was dry. My heartbeat was thudding in my ears. "So he is mine?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Lisa didn't answer. Instead, she reached below the counter and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. Slowly, like it was made of glass, she unwrapped it and slid it toward me. It was a photograph. A printed one. Not on social media, not in a frame. Just a loose 4x6, like the kind you get from a CVS machine when you're trying to avoid a digital trail. It was the boy, standing in a Halloween costume, a miniature version of a jellyfish, all tulle and silver thread, beaming at the camera. And on the back, written in a handwriting I recognized better than my own, was one word. Wyatt. My father's name. The name I told her I wanted to give our firstborn son, back before I knew she was capable of something like this. I stared at the photograph in Lisa's hands for what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than a minute. Wyatt. His name was Wyatt. The name I had whispered to Taryn that night. We stayed up talking until 4 a.m. about what we'd name our future kids. The name she laughed at for sounding too country, but later admitted had grown on her because it reminded her of strength, legacy, family. And now here it was, written in her handwriting, on the back of a picture of a little boy with my eyes and my father's name. A boy I'd never held, never met, never been told existed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. I felt like my ribcage was cracking open from the inside out. I didn't know if I was about to scream, or cry, or collapse. Lisa reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, but I jerked away before she could. "How long have you known?" I asked, and my voice was nothing like mine. It was hollow, raw, almost unrecognizable. Lisa bit her lip. Her shoulders slumped. "Since before he was born." The words didn't register at first. I blinked, confused. "What?" "She called me from the clinic," Lisa said quietly. She was crying, panicking, said she didn't know what to do, that she'd taken a test, then another, that she knew it had to be yours, but she didn't want to tell you. She said she was afraid of everything, that you'd trap her, that you'd fight her in court, that you'd try to take the baby. She thought I'd take her child away? I asked, incredulous. Me? After she left me without a word? After she vanished for 3 years like I was roadkill in her rearview mirror? Lisa winced. You don't get it. It wasn't just fear. It was guilt, too. She was ashamed. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but once she went through with it, there was no undoing it. So she made a decision, and I think she's been regretting it every day since. And Griffin? I asked. Where does he fit in? Lisa hesitated. He came later. Not that much later, but she told him she was pregnant when they started getting serious. She let him believe he was the father. I think maybe she even wanted to believe it was possible. I shook my head in disbelief. So she erased me. Erased us. Built an entirely new life on a lie. And let some guy raise my son. Lisa looked down, ashamed. You weren't supposed to find out. That's what she kept saying. That it was better if you didn't know. Cleaner. Safer. She thought she was protecting Wyatt. By lying to him about who his father is. I spat. She convinced herself you'd never cross paths, Lisa said. That you'd move on. That you'd fall in love with someone else and forget. But when I saw you that day at the store last year, I should have said something. I wanted to. But she begged me not to. Why now? I asked. Why the court petition? Why is Griffin filing for paternity if he thought the kid was his? Lisa went quiet. Her eyes flicked to the window behind me, like someone might be listening. Because he found the truth, she whispered. My blood ran cold. Taryn was never careful. He found an old email. A saved message she never sent. It had your name in it. Your number. And a photo of you too. She had written it late at night, but never hit send. Griffin found it on her old laptop, and he lost it. So that's why he stormed out the other day? Lisa nodded. He confronted her. Accused her of everything. Said he wanted a DNA test, wanted legal custody, and that he'd take Wyatt away if she didn't come clean. That envelope you found in the trash? That's from him. His lawyers sent it over the day before you saw them at the beach. Everything started spinning. I sat down on a nearby stool because my legs wouldn't support me anymore. My hands were slick with sweat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But more than anything, I wanted to hold my son. So where does that leave me? I asked. Lisa took a deep breath. Taryn doesn't know what to do. She's trying to keep everything from imploding. But you need to understand, she's still terrified of what happens if you go public. If you file, she's scared you'll go nuclear. I should go nuclear, I said. They took everything from me. They stole my child. They lied. And now what? I'm just supposed to stand here and wait for someone else to decide what part one get to play in my own son's life. Lisa didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I didn't show up at her house yelling. I didn't bang on the door or throw legal threats at her through a lawyer. I didn't go to Griffin's work to start a scene or post online in some vindictive spiral. God knows I fantasized about it. But when it came down to it, all I really wanted was peace and to see my son. So I did what she should have done 3 years ago. I told the truth. I called her that Saturday. She didn't answer, of course. But I left a voicemail, calm, honest, short. I told her I knew everything. I told her I wasn't here to destroy her life. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to be a part of his. I told her I was willing to work out anything, custody, visitation, boundaries, but that I would not be erased again. Not by her, not by Griffin, not by fear. She didn't call back that night, or the next day, but on Monday morning, I got a text. Meet me at the park on Elliott. 3 o'clock, come alone. It was raining lightly that day. One of those California drizzles that barely registers as weather but still paints the sidewalks dark. I showed up early and sat on a bench overlooking the small playground. Swings creaked in the wind. A jogger passed. Everything felt slow, unreal. And then I saw them. Taryn holding a small umbrella, her other hand wrapped gently around Wyatt's. He was wearing a little blue raincoat and red rubber boots, the kind that splash louder than they should. As they approached, Taryn looked different. Older, maybe, or just stripped of the walls she'd spent years building. There was no performance in her anymore. Just a woman who was scared and tired of being scared. She didn't speak at first, just gave me a small nod. Wyatt looked up at me. He didn't recognize me, of course. Why would he? But he studied me with this intense, quiet curiosity, the way kids do when they sense something matters. Taryn knelt down and whispered something to him. He looked at her, then back at me, then slowly walked over, one cautious step at a time. And when he stopped in front of me, I crouched down to meet him. "Hi," I said softly. He tilted his head. "Are you the guy from the beach?" I smiled, throat tightening. "Yeah, I guess I am." He looked at me for another moment, then said something I'll never forget. "You look like me." Taryn let out a quiet, broken sound behind him. Not quite a sob, not quite a breath, just something between the two. I didn't touch him, didn't overwhelm him, just sat on my heels in front of the little boy who carried my name, my blood, my eyes, and the silence of 3 stolen years. "You want to swing?" he asked. I nodded. And just like that, we walked to the playground. I pushed him gently, letting him rise and fall through the air, laughter cracking the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Taryn sat on the nearby bench, watching quietly. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just there, present, real, not my enemy, not my betrayer, just the mother of my son, and a woman who had made 1,000 mistakes, but who, in that moment, was letting me back into the one thing I cared about most. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, Wyatt was telling me about dinosaurs and jelly beans and how he didn't like green crayons. And I wasn't thinking about court papers or lies or what could have been. I was thinking about how much I didn't want to miss another second. Later, before we left, Taryn stood beside me. She looked over at Wyatt and said, without turning her head, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'd like to try." I nodded. "Let's just start with today." And we did.